All right, welcome everybody to Picture Perfect Part 2, Worth 1,000 Words. My name is Paul Wolter. I'm the director of the Sauk County Historical Society. Worth 1,000 words, of course, the old phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and we won't have 1,000 words per picture tonight, but I think you'll see how fun and engaging these pictures are. So let's get started. Let's start with some of the earliest known photos of Sauk County. Besides people, there's probably a few, mug shots out there that are from the maybe 1840s, maybe 1850s. But in terms of places, this is one of the verified oldest pictures known of Sauk County, and this is the Sauk County Jail, built in 1857. This is an Ambra type photograph, which was a glass plate. If you were here last week, learned all about glass plates, and this was done with wet chemicals, so it was a lot harder than the dry plate negatives that came along later. But anyways, here's the Sauk County Jail, built by plans submitted by Colonel Abelman of Rock Springs. He was a builder and architect, and he thought it would be great if we had a six-sided stone jail. The octagon phase was kind of a thing in the mid-1800s, and the hexagon was even sexier. If you've been to Milton, Wisconsin, they have the hexagon house there. This is about the only other building I know of in Wisconsin that was built in a hexagon shape. Why he thought that would be great, I don't know. It was about 24 feet long on each side, of course 2 stories. It had a pyramid-shaped roof, and at the very top was a skylight to light the interior. And this housed, of course, not only the prisoners, but the sheriff and his family. And Sheriff John Donovan is standing on the front steps there with his wife and their 2 children and another young lady, Miss Wyman. And Deputy Sheriff or Jailer Sullivan Newell is seated in the sulky out front. And we know this is from 1858 because the jail was officially opened in January of 1858. And then Canfield took this very photograph and had it made into a lithograph for his 1859 map. So we know that the picture is definitely from 1858. And things have been omitted, like the sulky in the front, to make it a little simpler for the lithographer. And if you're wondering where that was, it lasted until 1890. It was right where the Baraboo Post Office is today. It was a great step up from the first Sauk County Jail, which was a log structure on the north side of the square that was rather flimsy. But by 1890, it was definitely needing to be replaced. So just north of it, the county built this giant jail and sheriff's headquarters and residence in 1890, designed by Conover and Porter of Madison, and of course looking the part like the castle that it was. The cell block is on the left side in the back, and we found one rare photograph showing both jails together. So there's the stone jail in the background shortly before it was demolished because they didn't need it anymore. So. Now, another early photograph, which might be slightly earlier, we just don't know, is this one. This is the Ohio store, J.R. Davis proprietor on Oak Street. This is about where Nito's Bakery is today, maybe a little bit north of there, showing the early wooden buildings that filled downtown until fires or whatever took them away. So we're not sure exactly when this was. The clothing indicates the 1850s. We have Mr. Gowan and Mr. Withington in the wagon, and Nathan Updegraff is one of the gentlemen on the sidewalk. Those were tidbits that came to us from articles in the 1920s when this picture surfaced again. We did find one clue in the 1855 Baraboo paper that a Daguerrean gallery was upstairs. So if we read that, it says, "We most respectfully invite all who are in want of a good daguerreotype to call at our rooms over Davis's Ohio store in this village, and we will do our very best to suit you, but call and see us anyhow. Ladies, please dress in dark-colored or black dresses if you want a good picture. Hours best for taking children from 9 o'clock in the morning until 2 in the evening." And I think he meant afternoon. "Gentlemen, dress as you please and come when you please. John Shords, artist." So it's very possible with a Daguerrean Photoshop right upstairs in this store that he took this picture in 1855 or in 1856. We just don't know for sure, but it's certainly probably Mr. Shords that took the photo. Scooting down to Prairie du Sac, another early photo from 1860. This was probably rephotographed. The original was probably rephotographed with a glass plate negative, and then they scratched this writing on it, because I don't think they had all rights reserved in 1860. But you're looking at Prairie du Sac on the far side of the river. We're on the Dane County side, looking at the massive Wisconsin River Bridge, and in the foreground is a little village named Clifton that eventually disappeared. But note the high banks on the river. You'll also notice in a lot of these pictures the lack of trees. We have so many more trees today than a lot of these early photos. Devil's Lake, you name it. There just weren't as many trees around, probably due to fire, natural and man-made in the past, that was used to manage things. So here's looking the opposite way from Prairie du Sac, southeast across the Prairie du Sac Bridge, and towards Willersheim, what today is Willersheim Winery, right there. And you can see the house and the winery building there. And this was an amazing bridge. It was the second bridge on the Wisconsin River. The first was up at the Dells, very short. Up at the Narrows, they were pretty smart. Let's build a bridge at the narrowest spot. People in Prairie du Sac said, let's build a bridge at the absolute widest spot in the Wisconsin River. But it was going to their village, and they controlled it and assessed the fee. It was 80 rods long. Don't ask me how long that is, but it's very long. Contained a drawbridge section, and they built it in 1851. The ice summarily took it out, and they built it again with stone piers this time in 1852. And it lasted a long time. This was not treated lumber. They probably treated it with creosote and things like that, but it lasted about 60 years, finally being replaced in 1921. Pictures from the 1860s included lots of pictures of the hops craze here in Sauk County. Hops being the principal ingredient for making beer. The hops louse, an insect, had decimated the eastern United States hops crops in the 1860s. And people had been growing it here, but once prices started going up, it became a craze to grow hops here shortly after the Civil War. By 1867, prices were at their highest, reaching 55 to 70 cents a pound. They had been maybe 7 to 10 cents a pound before that. And then at 55 to 70 cents was 3 to 4 times higher than just in 1861. In 8 towns, what we know as towns today, of which Reedsburg was the center, there were 800 yards or 800 places growing hops, containing 1,600 acres. In 1867, which was the height, Sauk County produced 2 million pounds of hops, which I believe was it was a substantial part of the entire U.S. crop. And at just 50 cents a pound, that's $1 million in 1867 money sifting through the local economy. The inflation calculator says that's over $21 million today, but I think it was even more powerful back then. Farmers with as few as 7 acres of hops and cultivation could net profits in thousands of dollars. Unfortunately, the boom went bust in 1868 when the hop louse found its way here, and the eastern crop was recovering. So prices plummeted, and hops continued to be grown here for many, many years, but the boom was over. And if you had invested in costly equipment and hops houses and stuff, you were kind of in a pickle. At any rate, while the boom was on, especially in 1867, there was tremendous amounts of potential running through the community, and it was not only just the hops growers and the farmers. Of course, all the laborers. Many of these folks were brought in from elsewhere. By train up to Kilbourne and then down here to Sauk County. These youngsters, if they were old enough to pick, they were helping pick hops. The hops were grown on tall poles, and this is a picture from right here just outside of Baraboo, kind of where the city brush dump is on the south side. So we're looking back towards town. This is Potter's Hill, where they were growing hops, and that's the stone jail that we just saw earlier. So as I mentioned, not only the farmers were making money, but everybody else was making money as well, from merchants to people selling the hop poles, the tall poles that the hops grew on. People were making and selling hop stoves for drying the hops in your hops house and other things that were needed. So it was a large boom for many people, including people like Terrell Thomas at the Bank of Baraboo. The bank had been started in 1857, but moved to the corner where it is now, the Baraboo State Bank, in 1867 in this very handsome building, made of brick brought in from Milwaukee. We didn't have a train, we didn't have a railroad yet, so this was all brought to Kilbourne and then carted all the way here to Baraboo so he could build this building designed by E. Townsend Mix, a big Milwaukee architect. So I want to read an article from December of 1867, and it's titled, "What Hops Have Done," and it was written by Mr. William Grubb. And he said, "That some heads have been turned by the sudden leap from poverty to opulence is not to be wondered at, but the vast majority of fortunate have borne their good luck with becoming modesty. Isolated cases indeed have not been without some touching incident, the joy of discharging the old homestead mortgage, the bringing into town of the old woman, the liquidation of a long-winded shop bill, and the subsequent selection of a warm and substantial outfit for the scantily clad little ones at home. The release from the arduous labor of housework before the inestimable boon granted to some poor overworked housewife by a loving husband are but a few of the many blessings that have been vouchsafed to our people. Dropping into the Sauk County Bank the other day, I was overjoyed to meet old Uncle Simons, who had been just returned from Kilbourne City, having marketed his last bale. His hops had been passed as strictly prime, and his 7 acres had settled him $8,000. The old man clutched the heavy roll of greenbacks with nervous hands, and were it not for the support of the counter, his trembling frame would have been sunk to the floor. The worthy president of the bank greeted his new customer in tones of kindly cheer, for old Simon's face, as well as his hard struggle for subsistence, had been long known to all. "Well, Thomas," and this is the bank president, Simon said, cheering up as the kind words of the bank president fell upon his ears, "Old Simons has had a tough time of it these 18 years past, tugging among the stumps and rocks of the Baraboo Bluffs. It is now some 4 years since that good neighbor of mine, Colonel Abelman, God bless him, advised me to plant out a few acres of hops as being the only thing my failing strength would allow me to cultivate. You know my 2 boys were with Sherman, and there was none left at home but the old woman. Last year I put into the yard, and as you know, I paid the expenses, cleared up the taxes, and paid off old Blixen, and had only to thank the Colonel for the roots. Now there's $8,000. That'll clear up the hop house and all my debts, and the $6,000 goes right smack into Uncle Sam's bonds." The old man was here interrupted by the appearance of a new lumber wagon drawn by a good-looking pair of horses decked in all the glory of a silver-plated harness, the reins handled by a sturdy personage whom we recognize as the returned veteran Charlie, one of his sons. The old woman occupied a portion of the spring seat, while in the rear end of the wagon loomed up a goodly pile of bundles and boxes. As the eyes of old Simons passed at the latter, he said, "I told the old woman to lay in a good stock, and I see she's done it. Yesterday I traded off the oxen and bought me that team, and now I am going to have a buggy, too. These old bones were going to pieces, jostling over the rocks on the hard plank seat. Yes, Thomas, old Uncle Simons takes it. Easy at the balance of his days. The boys can have the farm, and the bonds will keep the old woman and me." Bidding adieu, Simons got into the wagon and drove away, but not until the new bank book showed a balance of $6,000 in the credit to the Sauk County Bank. We could narrate hundreds of incidents equally satisfactory in their results as the above, but time and space forbid. So just one look at the 1867 hops boom. Okay, scooting back down to Sauk Prairie, and this time Sauk City. A fabulous photo. Jack Barrett, who's here and was the co-presenter last week, sent me 1870 Sauk City. If you look carefully, this is 4 negatives put together. This would have been glass plate, wet glass plate, we believe. So this probably had to be developed very quickly up in the steeple of St. Aloysius Catholic Church from where this was taken, looking east towards Dane County. I hedge a bet that 99% or 95% of all of these buildings are gone, but there may still be a few that are with us today. But again, the lack of trees is always kind of astounding, even in the village. Back up here in Baraboo, just a couple years later, a photographer got to the second story of the corner drugstore and looking towards the northwest took this picture of the square. This is the earliest known picture of the square in Baraboo that I know of. So in the center we see the old brick courthouse from the 1850s, hard fought to produce. All the bricks had to be made locally. There was no railroad here until shortly before this picture was taken. Behind the Liberty Pole, the tall flagpole in the middle, is the old Wisconsin House, and that was a pioneer tavern and hotel that sat where the Al Ringling Theater sits today. So this would have taken maybe a minute or so to expose. So the men have been carefully staged on the walk. So it look like they're walking. The horses, however, could not hold it together, so they appear not to have a head. But this was the square in 1872. Just a few years later, in 1878, the Merrimack Railroad Bridge was replaced in steel. The original bridge had been built in 1871 when the railroad finally entered the center of Sauk County, the Chicago Northwestern. So no matter steel or wood, this was a 1,900-foot long bridge, still is, and again replaced here in 1878 in steel by the Leighton Bridge and Iron Works of New York. It had a truss section in the middle that was higher so that steamships could travel up river to Portage, which they could do before the dams were built along the river. This was replaced again in about 1895, and sections were replaced. They're still being replaced, so this is constantly a work in progress, but just a spectacular photo of a bridge, or of a train on the Merrimack Railroad Bridge. Up here in Baraboo, 1885, we're in the second floor of the old Warren Hotel, looking south on Oak Street. I'd seen this picture many, many years ago, and it had kind of been mislabeled. People didn't really know what it was. Well, we finally found out what the occasion was here, and part of the clues are the buildings that are or aren't there. This is the current corner drugstore right here, but you notice there's a building missing here. A massive fire had taken this block out in 1878, and one of the last buildings to go in was right here. So we kind of knew that date. And then we finally found an article from June of 1885 that describes what's going on here. So I'll read a little bit of that. So this is titled The Great Excelsior Show. Last Saturday, the principal streets of the city were lined with crowds of spectators who were out to witness the grand street parade of Excelsior twine binders and mowers, inaugurated by Peter Wilkinson, the Baraboo rustler, local missionary for Hoover and Gamble of Miamisburg, Ohio, in the sale of these celebrated machines. The success of Peter's lectures and buttonholing tour among the farmers of this county led to Saturday's demonstration, having been the day appointed for the general delivery of machines sold. At 10 o'clock, the scene at the freight depot, where the work of loading was in progress preparatory to forming the procession, was one of great activity. Pete was as active as a fortune wheel at a county fair, and the great beads of sweat that rolled out through the pores of his gingham shirt and $4 pants would have stocked a baptistry. At 11 a.m., the line was formed, headed by P. Wilkinson, J.G. Ayton, C.H. Fraze of Miamisburg, Ohio, and reporter in double carriage, followed by the Badger State Band, and the long line of lumber wagons loaded with the farmers' favorite machines, the Excelsior binders and mowers, 12 of the former and 4 of the latter. An Excelsior on trucks was a feature of the parade, which showed up the machine to perfection. Marching through the principal streets, the procession finally drew up on Oak Street, and with a large portion of the city population were photographed by Sim Mould. Dinner was then served at the Warren House to all the patrons of the Excelsior, and numerous invited guests. Several farmers failed to arrive in time for the parade, but the disappointment was in a degree offset by the sale of several binders and mowers. Not having enough of the latter to meet the demand, Peter went out and wept bitterly. We trust that the active agent of the Excelsior and his honest allies may have a harvest, a bountiful crop of success, the rich reward of enterprise, and open-handed liberality. Well, they don't write like that anymore. So that's what's going on here, and if you zoom in, that's the fun of digitizing these photos and being able to zoom in, is you can really see the detail. And every man, woman, and child in this photo is wearing a hat and long sleeves. I don't know what the weather was like on June 20th, 1885, but that was the sunscreen of its day. You wore a hat and you wore long sleeves. A lot of wool as well.
And barefoot.
And barefoot, yeah, the little kid on the rocks there. So that's the northeast corner of the courthouse square. And you can see the fabulous fence that was once around the outside. So that was taken from the second floor of the Warren Hotel, which of course was the fabulous hotel on the square. And that leads us to our next story. So the hotel had been built in 1878, the bottom two stories, but the mansard roof on the top and an extension to the back were added in 1884 by Thompson Warren, who was also the mayor. So it really became this grand hotel downtown in the centerpiece. So construction started next to it. It was a prime location. So in 1886, which was the zenith for building downtown, I think there were 10 or 12 stores that were built in the downtown that year alone. So next to the Warren Hotel, the five in red were being built in 1886. And right in the middle, with the yellow arrow, was the little one-story wooden cobbler shop of William Schultz. And for whatever reason, he did not want to join in the building frenzy. So we'll talk about what happens next. So there's Mr. Schultz's cobbler shop on the right. This is what we call the Dickey-Ashley block on the left, and you can see at the top the names of the two gentlemen that ponied up the money to build this, Mr. Dickey and Mr. Ashley. The Ashley side was a steam laundry, and the Dickey side was originally a harness shop. But imagine that building is not there, and there is a cellar hole there as it's being constructed. And I will read what the paper recorded in August of 1886. It says, "What Next" is the title. What Next? A place of business wrecked by a mob. William Schultz is an old and respected citizen of Baraboo, a man of over 60 years of age who has resided here ever since the war. He owns a lot on 4th Street between the lots now being built upon by Sheriff Ashley and George Ruland. When the present improvements on 4th Street, which was 4th Avenue today, were contemplated, more particularly after Messrs. Ashley and Dickey concluded to build, there was a general wish that Mr. Schultz should replace the old buildings occupied by him by a brick structure, so as to make a uniform front opposite the courthouse square. Mr. Schultz did not, for reasons which were purely a matter of his own business, choose to build at present, though he took the right to use the walls on either side of him and contemplated building in the spring. This was, of course, a matter of regret to those immediately concerned, namely Messrs. Power, Ruland, Ashley, and Dickey. But as an honest man who pays his taxes was presumed to have a right to do as he liked with his own, it was concluded that 4th Street would have to put up with an eyesore till Father Schultz got ready in his own good time to rebuild. It seems, however, that other parties not immediately interested thought otherwise and made up their minds to wreck the building, which was a comparatively easy matter, as it was a small wooden structure not larger than those of Levi Crouch and Phil Cheek on the same street, and was left by the Ashley excavation perched in the air. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Mrs. Schlag was aroused by noises in the street and went to the front door of the hotel. On opening the door, she saw a man stationed in front of the house who immediately gave a signal of 3 or 4 short whistles, upon which some 10 or 12 men congregated further up the street, scurried across the street, and secluded themselves in the courthouse park. During the absence of the watchman, these parties, instigated by persons who will in all probability have to answer for their conduct, had gone to Golmar's lumberyard, where they had secured 2 pieces of timber, 6 by 6, 12 feet long, and using these as levers with the pile of plank for a fulcrum, had attempted to swing the Schultz building into the Ashley cellar. The building settled forward, and the front corner, catching upon the sidewalk, prevented its going into the cellar and being utterly destroyed. It was, however, badly wrecked, the floor being torn out and the whole internal economy of the place being badly demoralized. It was the subject of curious observation by honest people going to church on Sunday morning, and the general opinion seemed to be that however desirable it might be to have that or any other property of private citizens improved, an outrage had been committed, which the interests of public order and security ought to be visited with punishment. Mr. Schultz offers a reward of $50, which will be paid upon the conviction of any person engaged in the nefarious transaction. Well, you can tell what happened because the Ashley Dickey block has been built and the little Schultz cobbler shop is still sitting there. So all attempts to get him to build only infuriated him more. He fixed the building and it sat there until 1921, some 35 years later, and was used for advertising, as you can see, for the Al Ringling Theater there at a time. So here's the view after all the buildings are built again, and the little Schultz cobbler shop there. So we kind of had the last laugh, but in 1888, a commemorative or a little promotional booklet was developed for the city of Baraboo. And this is the same view with the Dickey Ashley block. And by the way, note the horse coming out the front door because this was a harness shop originally. But what's missing? Exactly where the Schultz cobbler shop, it's not there. They've simply pulled the Dickey Ashley block up the street next to the other buildings. So they kind of had the last laugh, at least in this instance. So on the extreme left is the building that was finally built where Mr. Schultz's cobbler shop was, I think by his son in 1921. It was originally occupied by the Wisconsin Power and Light Company, and today we all know it as the Baraboo Burger Company. So when you're in there for a burger, again, think of Mr. Schultz and listen for the tapping of a cobbler's hammer. All right, swinging over to the other side of town, joining West Baraboo, 1890, several pictures of a spectacular train wreck from November of 1890. And this is the original location of the railroad bridge between Baraboo and West Baraboo, or Lyons as it was called. And if you go to Haskins Park today, you can see the stones of one of these piers still in the middle of the river. Eventually the track was changed location. But anyways, in November of 1891, there was definitely a train there, one track, and a spectacular wreck occurred. So the paper said, into the Baraboo, 25 freight cars together with their contents dumped into the drink. Saturday night last, the Chicago Northwestern Railway Company suffered a severe loss by the wrecking of a freight train at the railway bridge spanning the Baraboo River a short distance west of the Island Woolen Mill of this city. The freight train due at the station at 11 o'clock p.m. met a most disastrous fate. It is said that there were 51 cars in the train. It is reported that engineer H. Hale, when his engine was about to roll upon the bridge, saw a hot box on the right side of the train and near the middle of it, and whistled for brakes. That means he saw sparks coming from a car, whistled for the brakes. But before his call could be effectively complied with, his engine and 8 cars had crossed the bridge. The crash then came in the middle span of the bridge, and 24 cars plunged into the river, one upon the other, mashed and broken into kindling wood. 2 cars remained upon the east span and one upon the west span of the bridge in a somewhat dilapidated condition. The car that caused the wreck did not go down. The report of the disaster soon spread, and it was not long before the division officials were on hand with men and wrecking implements clearing the track so that traffic could be delayed no longer than it was possible to avoid. The spectacle that presented itself as day appeared Sunday morning was a sorry one. It looked about as forlorn as Fort Moultrie did after her magazine was exploded by a Union ironclad gunboat during the war. There was nothing right side up. Early Sunday morning, the people of the city began to assemble upon the east bank of the River Baraboo to view the wreck and to watch the workmen in their difficult tasks of clearing the way for the driving of piles upon which to support a temporary bridge. This work was indeed slow, made so by the compactness of the mass at the bottom of the river, and also by a carload or two of stone, which had been among the first to go down. About noon Sunday, a steam derrick arrived from Milwaukee when more rapid progress in clearing the way was made. Work did not cease for 48 hours until the trains were running again over a temporary bridge. It is fortunate that no one was injured in the wreck, this due to the fact that only the center of the train went down, the engine going over the bridge and the caboose remaining on the track, the other side of the bridge. It is also reported that one of the brakemen on the train was on the car next to the last one that went down to the bottom of the pond. He got a pretty lively shaking up. The wrecked cars were loaded with wheat, flax, seed, flour, barley, bran, and stone. And I think some people were literally helping themselves to product that was still visible. And I assure you that there are parts of this wreck still in the bottom of the Baraboo River at that location. One of the cool things about photos like this is that we can see the background. And if we go back to this first one there, you can get a great glimpse of Lyons, or West Baraboo, in 1890. And again, where are all the trees? And you just see how kind of sparse it was there. I believe this house still exists just as you come across the Shaw Street Bridge today and go by Haskins Park. All right, another great shot. This is the giant stone house that was built in 1855 or thereabouts by a man named Nathaniel Powell, and it was at the head of 8th Street, or at the head of Ash Street at 8th, and it's captured in the 1870 bird's eye drawing right there. You can see that Ash Street did not go any further north than 8th, and over here is East Street. And this house sat on about a 16-foot high hill, probably a terminal moraine from the glaciers, and Nathaniel Powell decided that would be a great spot for a house, which it was. It was eventually sold to the Warren family, same Warren family as the Warren Hotel, and by 1898 it was desired that the street be put through, and the Warrens decided that this would be great building lots if the house could be dealt with. Well, they decided to move it. So that is the picture that we have. This is the house being moved in 1898 by the M. Crow and Sons Company out of Chicago. They were called up here, and the paper said the first part of the task is to get the heavy building to rest on 5 timbers, each which is 60 feet long and 12 by 12 inches in the other dimensions. To raise or lower the structure, 200 jack screws are employed. When the time comes for acting, a whistle blows, and each screw is turned the fraction of an inch by several men. The performance is repeated again and again until the house has been raised or lowered an inch or more. After the building is ready to roll, some jack screws will be placed at the ends of the big timbers, and imperceptibly the structure will be made to go. After it has rolled about 125 feet south, it will be lowered 8 feet, then moved 50 feet to the east, and given another drop of 9 feet. So they not only had to move it, they had to lower it about 17 feet. The paper further enumerated that the house, which was owned by William A. Warren for many years, has stood so majestically upon the hill between 8th and 9th Streets at the east of Ash. It was an undertaking the like of which has never been before tried in Baraboo. The building is 41 by 50 feet with 18-inch thick walls 20 feet in height, besides a one-story wing with a ground floor. The estimated weight of the building is 500 to 600 tons. The structure was moved 75 feet to the south, 60 feet east to the new location. It was brought down between 17 and 18 feet to reach the present location. To do this work, it only required long experience, but an immense quantity of material. There were 5 train car loads of timber, including 200 jack screws, 175 rollers, etc. It required just 4 weeks for 10 men to place the building upon the new location. Well, that new location, and then they took away the hill, the lots were opened up, and the first person to purchase lots was Charles Ringling, who purchased several lots on the corner that was now developed. You can see the hill in the background of the house that he had built in 1900. And this is the only photo that shows the stone house in its new location to the right of the Charles Ringling house. Now, all would have been fine, except that just 10 years later, in 1908, for some reason, the Warren family, which was quite wealthy, lost the house to a sheriff's foreclosure sale. So guess who bought the house? Charles Ringling. And he summarily had it demolished, so it only sat in that location for 10 years, all that expense and time to move it. But he wanted a larger side yard. He actually wanted all the lots on 8th Street between Oak and Ash, which he achieved at some point. But anyways, that is the story of the stone house. All right, anybody have an inkling of where this massive 3-story commercial building was in Sauk County? It's not in Baraboo. It's not in Reedsburg. It's not in North Freedom. It's even better. It's not in Prairie du Sac. It's not in Sauk City. This was in Spring Green, Wisconsin. This was called the Post House, after Mr. Post, who had it developed, and it was an absolute whopper of a building. There's the one side of it, and it extended around the block. So the left side of the picture here is the front side of the Post block, built in 1894. And with the Sanborn maps, we can see what all was in there. It was a giant L-shaped building. It had a hotel and a restaurant, had a jewelry store, barber shop in the basement, general store, another general store, harness, boots and shoes. So just a ton of businesses and in there, and it also had an opera house and a stage, of course, on the second floor of the building. So if we go back a picture here, so it's just an absolutely massive building for a village that size. But it was well used. There you can see the stairs up to the Opera House here, upstairs in the second floor. So the reason we don't know about it is because it was destroyed by fire not once, but twice. The first fire took most of the building, the Opera House portion, and the parts to the north. That was in 1915. And fortunately, there was a firewall between the Opera House portion and the hotel portion, which saved this remaining piece of the building, the hotel and dining room portion, that many of us remember as the Post House restaurant. They did build other buildings to the left of it to replace what had burned down, including the Guard Theater. And then the rest of it, the older portion, burned in, right there's the Guard Theater, and then the rest of it went up in a spectacular blaze in 2004, if you remember that. So we lost one of the largest commercial buildings ever built in Sauk County, at least up to that point. All right, just a few years later, or the next year after Mr. Post built that, or 6 years later rather, 1900. This is the Independence Day Parade here in Baraboo for 1900. And we have several pictures of the parade because this is the first automobile ever seen in Sauk County. It was brought up here by train. It was fairly small but heavy. This was a Woods automobile. You've never heard of the Woods Automobile Company because it wasn't around for very long, but it was started by Clinton Edgar Woods, and this was one of his personal cars that he allowed to come up here to the Independence Day Parade. It was reported to cost $6,000, and that's the equivalent of $226,000 today. And it was an electric car. Believe it or not, most of the early cars, for a while, electric and steam-powered cars were more popular than gasoline engines. So in the parade, it carried the Columbian Mail Quartet along with the driver, who I'm sure was shipped up with the car. Also in the parade was this float from the William H. Allen Clothier, and he had a mule hiding inside that was pushing this float along, labeled as an automobile, direct from Paris. So when the article talked about the real automobile, it said then a real automobile came along. Another picture of the Woods automobile, and this is right in front of the E.S. Urswill Furniture and Undertaking store, which we know as Downtown Family Dental today. And there you can see the back of the Columbian Mail Quartet in this very expensive and very exotic vehicle. course, good cars, really couldn't develop rapidly until there were decent roads to drive them on. So here is a picture of downtown Reedsburg being the first pavers ever being laid on Main Street in downtown Reedsburg, 1899. The men have stopped for a picture, and note the guys in the back are all sitting in their wheelbarrows tilted down. They're not sitting down on the job, although they probably rested like that as well. But I love this guy in the front that's posing for the picture. So that was downtown. Of course, rural roads were a mess for a long time. There are reports in the 20s of the auto hearse here in Baraboo not being able to make it to the cemetery, and the old horse-drawn hearse having to be pulled out of a barn in order to get the deceased to the cemetery, because the cars just couldn't do it. So it wasn't until the 20s that concrete roads started to be built. We believe this is a part of Highway 12. We're not exactly sure, but this is the first cement going down for an improved Highway 12. Another picture of a steam traction engine pulling a road grader. The dirt roads that were around had to be constantly maintained by being graded and gravel put down. And of course, every once in a while you needed to cross a bridge as well. So some of those were old-fashioned wooden covered bridges here in Sauk County. And we had 6 wooden covered bridges in Sauk County in the day, all built around 1875, 1876 by one man named Jerry Dodd. And he was an expert at it. He did this crisscross lattice framework. These are about 3 by 12 foot planks that are pegged together in a lattice framework, and that makes a strong hollow tube that supports your bridge. Now here the boards have been taken off, but typically they were covered, and people are always wondering, why were they covered? Was it to keep the horses from freaking out, over going over water? No, it was simply to preserve the bridge, because there was no treated lumber, and it was much cheaper to just cover the bridge like this and keep it from rotting. This is the last covered bridge in Sauk County. There was 2 here in Baraboo, 2 near Rock Springs, 3 near Rock Springs, and then this was the Butterfield Bridge, which was the last one in place in Sauk County, which came down in the 1930s. And this was out east of town on the road to Portage. One of the ones here in Baraboo was actually the biggest, and this was the Ash Walnut Street Bridge. Built in 1875, it was over 160 feet long clear span, meaning it had no center support. So it spanned the river from edge to edge, and again, you can see the crisscross lattice work in place, and this one was even more special because it had extended eaves on the side, and there was a passenger or a pedestrian walkway on the outside of both sides of the bridges, so they didn't have to fight with the traffic inside the center of the bridge. And this one lasted until about 1892 when it was replaced by a steel bridge. Now, of course, all of ours are gone, but if you go to Cedarburg, Wisconsin, where they still have, I think they call it the last original covered bridge in Wisconsin, you'll notice a sign there that said it was made of Baraboo pine. And it doesn't mention Jerry Dodd, but it is exactly the same design as these bridges here in Sauk County. So I believe that the Cedarburg Bridge was built by Jerry Dodd. Who else would bring Baraboo pine down there to do it? So if you want to know what these bridges were like, you can go to Cedarburg, Wisconsin. And of course, this is a great shot of the south side of Baraboo along Walnut Street, looking north at the bridge. And you see some of the cute little one-story wooden boomtown storefronts that lined that area. And of course, sometimes a bridge wouldn't do, so this is an early shot of the Merrimack Ferry. The ferry went all the way back to 1848 when Chester Matson received a state charter to operate a ferry roughly in that location. It was more where the train bridge is today. And of course, you have to remember when the dam was not at Prairie du Sac, the river was a lot narrower and a lot lower. So this is after the dam has been built at Prairie du Sac, completed in 1914. So the water's a lot higher. We have powered gasoline engine powered ferries now, but mind you, the first ones were without a cable, so they were just kind of finding their way across the river. So I think the cable came along a little bit later. And here's an improvement. This is the coal sack 1. We all ride on the coal sack 3 today. And of course that is, if you don't know, that's a combination of Columbia, Sauk, or Sac County, the coal sack. Because originally both counties put in money to build the coal sack 1. So here's the coal sack 1 from 1924, built in Dubuque. Not sure, I guess they ran it up the river to get it here. It carried 8 cars. In 1933, the Wisconsin Highway Commission officially took over operation of the Merrimack Ferry, which would be the DOT today. And in 1961, the coal sack 2 is launched. But here's another picture of the coal sack 1 with all of 8 cars. And when the plant came along, there was a big discussion about whether they would build a bridge here to get all those plant workers to the plant faster. But as you know, that never happened, and this was literally the ferry when the powder plant was in full operation for World War II. Finally, it was replaced by coal sack 2, which is here, and today we ride on coal sack 3. And by the way, the ferry was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1974. All right, who recognizes that guy? His birthday's coming up. There's Wild Bill. There's William H. Canfield, Sauk County's first historian and first county surveyor. Came here in 1842. This is much, much later. This is around 1904, or a little bit later, out at Devil's Lake. And he had started the Old Settlers Association in 1872, and they were very active. And by 1904, they were desiring a permanent home. So he bought some acreage out near the south shore of Devil's Lake for the Old Settlers grounds and started building. And they built a replica settler's cabin on the hillside there. And on the left in the background, you can see what he was standing in front of, which was Canfield's treehouse. And he had gotten out to California at some point and saw giant sequoia trees and probably a giant sequoia stump, and decided that he wanted to build that here at the Old Settlers grounds. So he did. Built this round 2-story structure covered in basswood bark slabs. And then additionally in the background on the right, he built another round-ish building. I think they called it the Rotunda. That was kind of a gathering space. And here's another picture of the tree house. Kind of ramshackle, but was a makeshift museum. He had quite a few probably pretty neat and precious artifacts out there in the day. And then another picture of the rotunda. It kind of gets worse as you go along here in terms of quality of construction. And I've been out to the site. The only thing that I've left of course, are a ring of stones that these structures sat on. And this is the most miserable building spot you can imagine. So I don't know why, there was other better spots, but why he chose, maybe it was the view. This was the Old Settlers grounds out at Devil's Lake. Now when he died in 1913, the spark kind of went out of that group, which was dying anyways, and these buildings deteriorated, and the cabin, which was the most valuable of the structures, was eventually taken away, I think around 1921. While he was building all of that, Sauk County's courthouse decided to self-destruct. This was the old brick courthouse we saw earlier, the pride of the county in the center of the square. And by the turn of the century, it was needing to be replaced. The county board met once a year for a week, and it took years for this building to finally be decided upon to be replaced. In November of 1904, the county board finally voted narrowly to replace this with a new courthouse. And the following month, it self-destructed by starting itself on fire. And a very cold night, and all of the records were saved. They were in vaults or safes, except one of the pieces that did burn up was the very resolution to replace it that was still out on the desk of the county clerk. It was a very, very cold night, very bitterly cold, and it was all the people could do to keep the rest of the square from going up in flames as embers were landing everywhere. So it did self-destruct and then was replaced with the current old courthouse that we have today. I'm going to show a few people next. This was, I think, just a fun shot from Reedsburg. If you look at the fans closely, it says Mueller and Dangle druggists. And so we can get into the papers now. The Baraboo and Reedsburg papers have been digitized. We can now search them in nanoseconds for words like Mueller and Dangle, and found out they were in business from 1895 to 1902. And I thought, well, that's probably when this picture was taken. But if you look closely at the flag, this is a 48-star flag, which did not come along until 1912. So a bit of a mystery here. We're not sure if they were just holding old paraphernalia. Mueller and Dangle had gone out of business by 1902, so a bit of a mystery on this one. But this is really some neat swag that they're wearing. Yeah, fireworks started at 12:01 a.m. on July 4th and went as long as they lasted, which was well into the evening, and people were shooting guns, firing small cannons, and all the fireworks they could lay their hands on. Another interesting picture I came across, and unidentified, except that when you blow it up, there is a name above the door of the little boat, and it says J.G. Kleinlein. So again, because we can search the papers now, I was able to find an article or two about Mr. Kleinlein. And I would like to read a little bit of that. And his name was John G. Kleinlein. The Sauk County resident entered the Army, the Union Army, at the time of the capture of Jefferson Davis. He was a private in Company A, 1st Wisconsin Cavalry. Kleinlein's boat is in peril. This is in 1911. Is in peril, and the flag of distress may be seen to go up almost any day. At Kilbourne, after the big $1 million dam was built, the river lost much of its water below the obstruction. When the water is shut off, the river below the dam is particularly dry. When this state of affairs comes to pass at Prairie du Sac, Kleinlein's houseboat is liable to rest upon a solid foundation at an angle of about 45 degrees. This will probably not disturb the veteran, for his worries are few. The former soldier knows all of the good fishing grounds in the Wisconsin River at Prairie du Sac, for he is a devoted fisherman. Occasionally finds a pearl inside the shell of an unfortunate clam, and in winter he sets a trap for the unwary game. His habitation is tied up by the Milwaukee Depot, and there he may be found in hot weather and cold, in sunshine and rain, by day and night. Every little while his ship comes in. Uncle Sam does not forget his faithful warriors of half a century, meaning he was getting a Civil War pension. So he had a little boat there at Prairie du Sac, tied up usually near the Prairie du Sac train depot. So if you know where the Eagle Watching Park is, it would have been right down below that. And again, you can see Willersheim Winery there in the background. Even as late as 1911, there's still way less trees than there are today. So that is Mr. Kleinlein. He lived until 1924, living on his houseboat. Took ill and was several months in the hospital, but lived many, many years on that little houseboat. Love to know what happened to it. This is a wonderful photograph of a Ho-Chunk woman taken by Edward Burt Trimpe. And if you know the Trimpe name, he was a famous photographer here in town. If you ever are at an antique store and see one of his photographs, you know, in the cardboard mounting, it's stamped Trimpe, buy it and either keep it for yourselves, or better yet, let us scan it or donate it to the museum, because he did wonderful work. And he took this picture of Emma Pettibone, again a Ho-Chunk woman, and her son on April 3rd, 1912, and he said he labeled it as the Madonna effect, posing them as Madonna and child. It was quite a famous photo, and I would like to read what was said about it several years later in 1918. Mrs. Emma Pettibone, an Indian who had her photograph taken with her son about 5 years ago, is in the city again. Many people here have undoubtedly seen this photograph at the post office. The little child was one of a pair of twins. It is very unusual in the Indian race to have twins. There was a little daughter born to this woman's sister last evening. The two women are staying at the City Hotel and are from near Mauston. Unfortunately, I couldn't find out much more about her, but she was photographed by other people, including H.H. Bennett up at the Dells. All right, this is a picture I used for publication of this talk, because when I first saw this photo, I thought this surely must be damage to the negative, to the glass plate negative or something. But it's not, and we'll explain what you're looking at here. This was part of a terrific windstorm, either straight line winds or full-on tornado that hit Baraboo in June of 1914. It's a long article, but I'd like to read just a couple of other incidents that happened before we get back to that picture. It said, prank on First Avenue. On First Avenue at the C.R. Compton residence, the wind carried a woodshed from its foundation and piled it up neatly between a touring car that was standing in the yard and the neighboring house. There was just room for the sides and roof of the shed to be laid down, one fold on top of the other between the car and the house. The building was constructed of heavy oak timber, and had it landed on the car, it would have been ruined, but the lumber was laid down without even scratching the car or breaking a window in the home beside it. Another incident on 2nd Avenue, curtain through window. At one residence on 2nd Avenue, the wind played a peculiar prank. The windows of the house were open on the south side but closed on the north side. The wind swept through the rooms from the rear of the house and drove a portion of a lace curtain through the window between the casing and the glass without breaking the window. The curtain hangs down on the outside of the window, and it will be impossible to remove it without either taking out the window pane or cutting the curtain. So that's the kind of wind we were dealing with. Trees down all over town, wires down. This happened early in the morning. And what we're seeing here is the Urban House Hotel. This is down on Ash and Water across from Gem City Saloon today. And it said, roof off Urban Hotel. The Urban Hotel on Ash Street probably presented the most picturesque damage. The sheet tin was ripped from the roof of the large building, and one strip weighing more than a ton was hanging over the telephone wires in front of the building to the street. The brick border around the top of the building was also blown off, and there were bits of brick, wood, and tin strewn on the ground for a block or more. The damage will amount to several $100s. A number hurried to the place with cameras this morning to secure a picture of the building before repairs were made. And we don't know who took the picture, but we're glad they did. So of course you can see the power lines up there somehow miraculously holding up, hundreds and hundreds of pounds of metal roof. And if you were sleeping upstairs early in the morning, you probably thought it was the end of the world with all of that noise. And the building is still there, as I mentioned. All right, a few photos from nighttime. Interior photos were extremely rare in the early 20th century. Nighttime photos were even rarer. Most of the ones we see are from the 20s. That kind of took technology that long to catch up. So here's one of downtown Reedsburg, 1924, from the Meyer studio, taken by Edwin Meyer, and miraculously with a lightning strike. He could not have planned this. He couldn't even plan this today. So he must have been rather happy with this photo. That's why he copyrighted it at the bottom and left it for us to prove it existed. Interestingly, a row of lights down the center of the street. This was probably related to some sort of street fair or something that was about to take place or had taken place. Another nighttime photo I've used a lot, but Baraboo, 3rd Street, looking west at the Risley Brothers building on the right side, built in 1910, now the home of the Baraboo Music Store. But when this was built, this was very big town stuff. This was a 3-story plate glass facade, 3 stories of display. This was like downtown Chicago coming to downtown Baraboo. And then to put Christmas lights all over it. This was the height of elegance and effort here in downtown Baraboo at Christmas time. All right, we'll end with a couple of photos, fast forwarding about 40 years to the great manhunt of 1961. If you were alive then, you know that 3 thugs from Chicago gunned down a policeman and injured another one in Lake Delton after being spotted at Ishnala, lighting cigars with $20 bills and passing money around. And they were pulled over and burst out of the car. And shot the 2 officers and then took off on a wild high-speed chase up into Juneau County. One was apprehended after he was ejected from the car, but 2 were on the loose after they crashed their car and escaped into the woods. So it was about a week of really terror in the area. There were dozens and dozens of roadblocks sealing off the entire county and beyond, and regular manhunts like this. I mean, kids were armed with guns. Anybody that could hold a gun was sent off into the woods to help on these searches. So long story, but they were apprehended, and this is a rather famous photo of Mike Spencer, who was actually the deputy sheriff at the time. He could not run for a 3rd consecutive term, so his wife Dolly Spencer was actually the sheriff, but we all knew who was really running the show. This is Mike Spencer on the left, bringing in prisoner Lawrence Nutley and his helper Don Matty on the right side there. So William Wolter, Lawrence Nutley, and Richard Nickel were all tried and convicted for that infamous crime. It's kind of a downer to end on, but I just love this photo so much because it's really, you know, AP news-worthy quality stuff. Fortunately, Mike Spencer left us all of his memorabilia. We have a piece of the escape car with bullet holes in it. We have all the photographs and other memorabilia from his career.